pawn to get your stat weights to figure out what pieces of gear are going to be best and optimized for your character. I'm going to be going over a few things in this video, including what add-ons you need, as well what programs you need, and how to use SimCraft and how to read it and everything. So let's just get started with the basics here. Looking at the add-ons that you're going to need to go into be able to sim your character, there's going to be 3 add-ons that you want. First one is going to be Pawn. This add-on is going to tell you the stat weights and how good a piece of gear is that just drops, and you'll be getting your stat weights from SimCraft. But the Pawn add-on is going to be the add-on that reads all that data and tells you if a piece of gear is better for you or not. So that's going to be the first add-on you want. The second add-on you want is the actual SimCraft string add-on for in-game. This is separate from the client, but this is going to be important for later. So we'll take a look at this in a little bit, but these are the 2 main add-ons that you want. You can find both of them on Curse or the Twitch client if you have it. And finally, of course, we're going to need the SimCraft program. So if you just go to the simulationcraft.org, you'll come to this site right up here, and if you go to downloads, you want to look at nightly builds. Nightly builds are daily updated versions of SimCraft, so they'll have all the updated stuff for, including all the Entourage changes, all the tier sets and everything like that. So basically you want to get all the nightly builds as much as you can. So after our downloads right here, you can find all the nightly builds on this link right here. Find which one works best for you. I use Windows 64-bit version, so I'm going to be clicking on this one right here. I'm going to be getting this one. And after you got those things right there, let's go ahead and take a look at SimCraft once you have all three of these things downloaded and installed. So we'll go ahead and boot up our SimCraft right here. So on the welcome screen, this is what we're going to be looking at. So I'm going to show you guys exactly how to read this, how to use this tool, and how to use it to get your stat weights and figure out what's best for your class. Granted, this is mostly only useful for DPS classes. Unfortunately, for healers and tanks, it's a little bit difficult, or it's a little bit different than raw stats and stuff. It's like you need this stat, you need this stat, but for DPS, it's all math. So this is what this program is used for. So you get a little welcome screen here. It's nice, cool. You can read through these things if you want. It's not important, sure. We go to import right here. This is going to be the first thing we want to take a look at. If you do not have the SimCraft string add-on, this is how you're going to get your character information. So if you go to import, we're going to select our region, check whatever realm that you're on. For example, I'm on Storm Rage right there. I'm going to type in my character name. I'm going to go ahead and hit import. It's going to load up all my information from the armory. So whatever you guys logged out, whatever your armory currently says, what gear you have, what talents you have and everything, that's exactly the information that's pulling here. So that is going to be all of this stuff right here. This other stuff is going to be the action priority list and everything like that, like what spells you want to do. So you can change this up a little bit if you got a little bit more knowledge with SimCraft. And then this is the actual gear that you have on your character, average gear summary, your item level, how much stats you have, and all that stuff. So we got our character imported. Perfect. Now we want to set up the sims, like how many iterations we're going to run, what kind of boss fights we're going to be doing. So under that we're going to go. It's going to go ahead and tick the options button on the top, under the globals tab here. So we're going to do all the basics options. Most of the stuff you can kind of set to default because it's all pretty decent. I mean, if you're a little bit more of an expert, you get comfortable. SimCraft, you can change up a lot more settings and stuff, but for the most part, you want to choose your armory region. Armory spec is the active spec that you're currently in. We're on the live version, not the PTR. You can check both if you'd like. Target error, we're going for the maximum amount of DPS, so we don't want any kind of target error. So if a computer played our characters perfectly, we want to see how much DPS our characters can pull. So I always set that to NA, not available. Iterations, 10,000 is a good number. Because, say, for example, the lower the iterations, the worse it is, I feel. Because, for example, if you have one iteration, you have one pull where you have all the procs in the beginning. You do this insane burst damage, right? That's what that one iteration is going to do. Or it's going to be the one where it's like you don't get any procs. So it's not a good judgment on how much DPS you do or how much a stat weight's worth because of your crits or something like that. So having a good, healthy number of how many times it runs the sims over and over, 10,000 is a good starting point. We set the fight length to 5 minutes. Vary length percentage to 20%. Depends on like how quickly you kill the boss, or if it's like if you your rate doesn't get procs, or if you get procs or something like that, it kind of changes how long the fight is and everything. So I usually set that to 20. I believe that's the default. Fight style patchwork. This is going to be, you could change these up a little bit if you'd like, but I always set it to patchwork because in my mind, I'm trying to figure out the most DPS my character can do on a single target fight, and I base it off of there. So that for that reason alone, I choose Patchwork fight. A lot of people can choose like Helter Skelter or Beast Lord, like light movement, heavy movement kind of fights, but I always set it to straight Patchwork, how much DPS, maximum DPS I can pull. So I'll leave it with that. Challenge mode disable because that's going to scale your character down. You don't want that. Default roll, I always set these to auto. I'm pretty sure this is all the default settings anyways. Number of enemies, this is how many active mobs there are in a boss fight. For example, Goroth, there's only going to be one fight. So you're going to be testing out your pure single target DPS. If you want to test out fights like, say, Harjatan, for example, where you got some AoE fights in there and everything like that, you can go ahead and set the number of enemies to 4 if you'd like. This is going to be how you sim between the difference between pure single target, AoE, some kind of cleave, 2-target cleave, or anything like that. For the most part, you can change as much as you want. I always leave it on 1. Like I said, I just want to figure out the pure single target DPS that I'm doing. Raid boss is important because the raid bosses are scaled 3 higher level than what your current character is. So if there was hit rating in the game or anything like that, still it would take those factors into account. I leave all this stuff pretty much on the basic default settings. I have never really touched these at all. I kind of just leave them at the same target race humanoids. For example, if you have trolls back in the day, I don't know if they still do or not, they used to do extra damage to beasts. So if you're a troll and you're on, Thok back in Siege Wargammer or something like that, you can change this to beast to see how much damage you could do to him, since you'll be doing improved damage to it. Like I said, everything else is going to be default here. I don't really change this at all. I mean, latency, you can kind of change this depending on how much latency you have on your server or whatever. You got the super low if you're right on top of the server. I usually run between a 50 and 100 ms. I usually just keep it on the 100 ms just to be safe. And then of course we got the Australia ms if you're there, I guess. Okay, sweet. Next up, we got the buffs and debuffs. This used to be a lot longer back in the day before the ability prunes, but just make sure everything's checked there, because obviously all these things are going to be up at the boss at any given time. Sweet. Scaling plots and reforge plots. This is where you're going to be getting your stat weights. So under scaling here, if you want to see your stat weights, you always want to check the enable scaling. I usually leave on the default stuff, which is no and default. So now here, what you want to check, you don't want to check everything, because the more stuff you have checked, if you have plots, reforge plots, scaling, and you have all these stuff checked, the other things here checked, it's going to take a lot longer for the sim to actually go through, and it might take, a quick sim right here, probably going to take like a minute, maybe 2 minutes tops. But if you check all this other stuff, it's going to take like upwards of like 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes even. So you just check everything that you have for your character. For example, I play a caster, I play a mage, so I'm going to check the intellect one, and I want to see all my secondary stats. So I got that all checked. If you're a warrior, you want to check the same stuff. I don't really care about this stuff that doesn't really apply to DPS or anything like that. Weapon DPS for strength classes, sure, but it's you can't change your weapon DPS. You know what I mean? We have artifacts, so it's nothing, right? So yeah, check whatever you have. Intellect, spell power, and attack power. That's all rolled into the main stats anyway, so I don't really check any of those either. So I just do the intellect, secondary stats, perfect. Plots. This is going to be how much, if you gain extra haste rating or you gain extra crit rating, how much your DPS is going to improve or like go down, actually, because you're like trading. Well, I mean, obviously, if you get more haste, your DPS is going to go up, right? So if you want to enable plots, you can so you can see if you get like an item level upgrade of your current tier piece, it's just pure more stats. You can see how much of an increase it's going to give you. I don't really use the scaling plots too much, but once in a while I'll kind of see it just for fun to see like, hey, what happens if I were to get 10,000 more haste? Oh, it's like, oh, I could do that much more damage. Sweet. Reforge plots works similar to plots, but it swaps out one value for another. So it would say, like, if you were to swap out 500 haste rating for 500 mastery rating, what the DPS difference would be. So that's what Reforge plots is used for. I don't really use that too much because I just run sims constantly and everything and get my stat weights from there. So what we're going to do for this first initial sim, we got the enable scaling on. We're going to check all of our stat weights and everything like that. We got all the buffs and debuffs checked. We have all of the boss encounters, everything set up perfect, ready to go for us. So now we go to simulate. This is the one that we loaded for our armory right here. So after it's all loaded up, we're going to go ahead and just click on simulate. It's going to take a couple minutes because it's going to simulate the sim. It's going to see how much DPS we do, and then it's going to do all the scaling, like how much our haste is worth, how much our mastery is worth, how much our crit is worth. And with those values, we're going to import those into the game, and from there, our pawn add-on is going to read that information and tell you if a gear piece is an actually upgrade or not. So we're going to just go ahead and wait until it's done. It's going to be scaling. There's scaling verse. It takes a while. If you have a better computer, it goes a little bit quicker. So, all right, so here we go. The simulation, according to the median simulation out of the 10,000 iterations I just did, it says my mage will do roughly 1.3 million DPS. Obviously, it's going to fluctuate, but that is how much average DPS you should pull a single target. It's got your talents right there, so if you want to make sure those are all right, you can log off in your armory, change stuff like that. But with the Simulation Craft add-on in game, I'll show you an easier way to do that. So here what we have is our stat weights, scale factors. So pretty much this is what it's saying is haste is our top stat as a fire mage with the current gear setup and the current talent side chosen, followed by verse, which is tied with mastery roughly. Verse pulls ahead very slightly, and then finally crit is last on the list as well as int. So at this rate, as a fire mage, the gear I'm looking for is heavy haste gear, preferably mastery gear, because I like mastery on a mage, because most of the time fights aren't complete single target, and the more targets there are, mastery kind of takes over, but that's more kind of mage stuff. You don't need to worry about that. Common class knowledge is actually important when you're kind of reading these sims as well. And you can kind of read through here and everything like that. You can see, like, okay, the most DPS I'm going to have during execute time, Power Blast is going to be doing most of my damage, followed by Phoenix Flames, Dragon's Breath. Even if you're weaving it in, that's like, oh, it's kind of weird. I guess I have to weave in Dragon's Breath. You don't have to, but it's just saying if you were to use Dragon's Breath, or if you were to use a spell that you don't normally use, you would kind of see this kind of damage output from it. You can kind of see the length of the fight here. At the start, it looks like I peak out around maybe 2.9 million DPS. After the cooldowns are over, it looks like I drop a lot, and then another combust, it looks like it comes up right there, and I get another small spike, it goes down to get another combust, and so on and so forth. This is just a better bar graph version of the scale factors and stuff right here, so you can kind of see how far ahead the other stats are. Damage sources, if you were to do a 5-minute fight on a target dummy, and you look at your spell breakdown, this is roughly what it should look like. This is just a pie chart version of what your details or your SCADA or your recount kind of says right there. So to say, Power Blast is going to be your number 1 of your damage, followed by Ignite, and then you got Fireball, Fire Blast. You got all those other spells kind of thrown in there too, but majority of your damage is coming from Pyro Blasts and Ignites, according to these sims right here. And you can see right here, out of all the iterations, there's a few iterations. There's 45 of them that I did between 1.19 million and 1.2 million. And then on the other side there, that I had let's see if I can find one. 24 iterations that did 1.51 million to 1.53 million. But the average one, obviously, is going to be on the top. So it's like, for the most part, you'll have some fights where you do a little bit more, some fights you do a little less. But on average, you'll be doing roughly this amount of DPS. And it'll break down the spells, like how much time you spent casting fireballs, yada yada. A lot of cool stuff here. Buffs and everything like that, how much tells you how many buffs you get per fight. For example, in this 5-minute fight right here, on the average, I get 1 Bloodlust. Obviously, Combust, I get nearly 4 Combustions during a 5-minute fight. Phoenix Flames, Pyroblast Bracers, I get roughly 13.3 procs in a fight. That's a little high. From my knowledge, I only get about 2 per fight. So, but hey, iterations, man, they're sims, they work. So this other stuff, I don't really care about this other stuff. It's like health stuff, and I don't really pay attention to this. If you guys are more an expert and you understand like what this stuff's going on, please let me know, because I really don't. I don't really know and stuff. I don't really care, to be honest. I look at the main stuff up top, your health and stuff. All right, so now that we got this information, what do we do with it? We're going to go ahead and copy this pawn string, because you guys should have the pawn add-on already installed. So if you go ahead and Control-C this, copy it. We go back into in-game. And now, if we go to our character screen, you'll notice a little pawn add-on checked into your character screen. So if you go ahead and click that, this window is going to pop up. So now this window is going to be all of the information where you plug in from SimCraft. So what we want to do, under scale here and everything like that, you'll have a couple of them default ones like checked up and everything like that. You might have like some of these ones right here, the Arcane Mage, Fire, Frost. Most of the time I turn these off and run my own sims, because this is the default ones that assume what you want for your character. But every character is different. You always want to sim your character. So under this one right here, so we'll go ahead and take one, and then if we're going to go ahead and import a new scale. So if you share your scale, it's going to go ahead and import. We're going to Control-V, the information that we got before, and then if we hit OK, it's going to pop up with a new one right here. So if you don't want to show certain things on your tooltips and everything like that, under the scales, there's this option right here that says Show Scale and Tooltips. So you can kind of see currently I have 4 selected, but for these other ones, these ones are not selected at all or anything like that, right? So the only ones that say Show this Scale and Tooltips is going to be the ones that shows up for you. So you can have one, for example, I only run 3. I run Fire, Frost, and Arcane. I know what I need for AoE in those situations, so I'm mostly looking for single target DPS, but you can uncheck those if you'd like. You can rename it if you want. So this is the one that we currently have, Scryx under Fire. You can change the color if you want, whatever it shows up on your tooltips. And then if you go to under weights, you can see this is already automatically imported with the weight values that we got from the simulation craft. So that's nice. It looks cool. And now what does it do? Okay, so now that you have pawn, if you look at a piece of gear, for example, you'll see a little green arrow under this piece of gear, like right up here. So if you hover over this, on the bottom of the tooltip, you'll see Scryx Fires, the one we just uploaded. Currently, over my other boots that I have, these boots are actually a 5% increase from the ones I have. Simply because the haste value is so high compared to every other stat, it's going to outweigh even the socket, the mastery, the crit, and I gain a little bit extra and stuff. With all those stats pooled into one area, it'll say, if I put on these boots, the new ones are roughly 5% better than the ones I currently have on. But it is also important too. Every time you get a new piece of gear, you're going to want to resim your character to get new stat weights. Stat weights are very dynamic. Every time you get a new piece or you change something, all the values for everything else, they shift. So it's important to sim yourself on a daily basis. Every time you get new gear, every time you get new, whatever, you always want to make sure that you're simming your character so you get the proper, accurate information for your gear. All right. So next thing is next, blah, blah, blah. Coming up, the SimCraft add-on. I installed this add-on. You haven't talked about it. What does it do? Okay, so rather than relogging, so the information from the import takes the information from your armory, which you would put on gear. You would change your talents. You would do whatever. You would log out. The armory would update a little bit, and then you can pull the information. The SimCraft makes that instant. So for example, if you had the add-on, we type in /simc, it pulls up the information already right here that you need. It pulls up the gear from the bags if you want to compare anything from right there. It's got all your information right here. So if you were, instead of getting the information from the armory, if you were to just copy all this information, we'll load up our simulation craft here. If you open up a new tab under simulate right here, replace this with the current text, that is doing the exact same as this. Outside of the action rotation and everything like that, you can copy this and put it in there, and so you can change some things if you'd like. But this is basically the exact same thing. So it's super nice because you can swap out gear a lot quicker this way and change gear and change how you can compare trinkets too. For example, I'm going to show you guys how to sim trinkets right now. So we got those two trinkets on right now, but I got a couple other trinkets here. Maybe I want to use my Whispers in the Dark. Maybe I think it's better than my Owl trinket, or maybe I got this Charm of the Rising Tide. I want to actually see if it's good. So what we're going to do with that is we're going to go ahead and put on these other two trinkets here. Let's type /simc, and under the trinket option right here, we're just going to copy this information right here. So we're going to go ahead and copy that under simulation craft here. In order to sim trinkets, if you hit copy, it's going to create a carbon copy of the very first sim that it does. Equals, we're going to put a name on this one here. So we want to sim all the trinkets that we have. So we're going to put tear. We're going to call this one tear from below. I want to put that one right there right now. So, okay, so the tear below is the very first trinket that we had on. So we're going to copy this one. We're going to put it right there. I'm going to go ahead and actually delete this because I'm going to run a sim with no trinkets on, and I want to compare how good the trinkets are and how much DPS they give my current character. And then we are going to make another copy, and we're going to call this one the Owl trinket. And that is going to be this one right here. And same thing for Trinket 2 and everything like that. I'm going to go ahead and just replace this with Trinket 1 just to make it consistent. We're going to delete. We're going to run the sim as if our characters have no trinkets on, and we're just going to see which one is better. And now that we have, we're going to go ahead and copy this one. This one is our, what trinket is that? Is the Whispers trinket. And finally, we have one more to do, and this one is going to be our Charm of the Rising Tide. Copy that. Boom. Charm. Put in Trinket 1 just to be consistent. And now the more copies you have, the longer it's going to take. So obviously we're not checking out gear weights or scaling or anything like that. So we're going to go back into options here. We're going to uncheck scaling, go back to simulation. We're going to run this copy. So it's going to run the sim for the very first character, how much DPS this can do with no trinkets. It's going to run the exact same sim, how much DPS I can do if I were to put on the tear with no other trinket. And then and so on and so forth. So this way you can compare what trinkets are better for your character, what's going to give you the most DPS output. So if you got two trinkets that are super close, you're not sure which one's going to be better. When people say sim it, this is what they mean. So we're going to wait for it to load. Obviously, we're running a lot of sims and everything, so we're going to wait for each iteration for each trinket to go through. And now here we go. So as you can see, Scryx is going to be the base, the first one that we ran. It did 1.278 million DPS with no trinkets. If I were to only put on the Charm of the Rising Tide, it would increase my DPS by that much. just to whispers, it increased my DPS by that much, terror and owl and so forth. So at this reading from this, my best 2 trinkets out of all the ones I sent were the owl trinket and the terror trinket, because they are giving me the most damage output, right? Makes sense. And so that's how you compare trinkets and everything too. So I really hope this guide video was very instructive, and if you guys constructive. If you guys have any feedback or anything like that, feel free to leave a comment or message me in game or something like that if you'd like. I'm always hanging out, always helpful. Check us out on our Discord too. I'll have a link to all the websites and everything as well for all the information that you need, all the add-ons at the end of this video in the description. So if you guys like what you see, feel free to hit the subscribe button on the YouTube. Follow us on our Twitch page at twitch.tv/Sinnical, as well as follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/Sinnical_GG. Until next time, guys, have a great day.